Hello to all dear Manhwa fans. I hope you are having a wonderful day. Before we begin, I want to send a very special greeting to those who left their comments on the previous video. Sending you all a big hug. A special shout out to Slug.edits843, who managed to leave the first comment on the previous video. You are the fastest. Thank you so much. Now, without further ado, let's begin this incredible summary. The next morning, the loudspeakers woke Junhee, calling everyone to the living room to receive instructions about the experiment. It was hard for her to get up, but she finally made it out with sore legs and a slight headache from overexerting herself the night before. Upon arriving, she ran into Han, who looked at her in surprise. Distracted, he didn't understand until she pointed at his head. He had forgotten to put on the wig. He quickly put it on, realizing how close he had been to being discovered. In the living room, Dawn asked if he had slept well while Hannah stared at him intently. Surprised, Yoon responded with a greeting, thinking that if everyone had taken the candy, Dawn must have prayed alone. Annoyed, Han pinched him and told him to focus. With his arm aching, Junhee sat with the others. At that moment, Junhee arrived looking disheveled. The loudspeakers announced that candy and food would soon be distributed. The lights went out again, surprising Junhee, who thought Yi was afraid of the dark. The young woman stumbled while looking for a seat, and he helped her. Just then, the lights came back on, irritating Yunie's eyes. From the loudspeakers, it was announced that there were supplies for a few days at the main door. Each person had to take only what was necessary, and the rest had to be stored in the refrigerator. Dujon expressed his frustration, saying he wanted to quit the experiment. Meanwhile, Laura was curious about the menu, and Yang complained to Junhee about how he had grabbed her hair. He apologized as the voice mentioned that those who wished to leave only needed to touch the main door. However, they would not receive the payment, and the other participants in their room would be disqualified. Additionally, there would be inspections to prevent anyone from taking medication out of the building. This alarmed Junhee, who imagined what would happen if he were discovered dressed as a woman. If that happened, he would be immediately exposed. Noticing his nervousness, he raised his voice, saying that they were all there because they needed the money, that it was only a week, and he reprimanded Dojo Han for wanting to give up, arguing that everyone was suffering equally. Resigned, Dojo Han admitted that she had no other choice but to stay. Han and Junhee exchanged glances, and he silently thanked her. The voice sounded again, announcing that none of the participants had decided to leave the experiment, so they could now begin distributing the supplies. Everyone took their boxes and was instructed to check the test tube inside the Ziploc bag, along with their lunches. Junhee found hers, and upon reading the instructions, discovered that to verify the effectiveness of the candies, they had to submit a saliva sample every morning and leave it in the refrigerator. This worried Junhee, as he didn't know if they could identify his gender from saliva. With blood, they definitely could, but with saliva, it was still a risk. Han watched him in silence while Yan headed to her room. Meanwhile, Han told Dawn to go ahead since she needed to use the bathroom. Her friend invited her to visit later, promising her snacks and the chance to eat together in the living room. Junhee was still worried as the girls placed their samples. Dujon complained to Laura about spitting, telling her to do it in her room. Hana, seeing Junhee hesitating with his test, asked him to give it to her. Confused, Junhee agreed, and she spit into his sample. He couldn't believe that Han would do that for him. When she finished, Han asked if he was happy. Junhee replied that he was and told her he'd see her the next day. The rest of the girls were also handling their tests, while one of them watched Laura, who was getting messy, and Laura couldn't take her eyes off Junhee. Dajae commented that she had always been a bit strange, but Laura kept staring as Junhee entered her room, while Dojon continued complaining about the program. A little later, in his room, Junhee ate his food, consuming a large amount. Despite everything happening, time seemed to pass too slowly for him. He imagined that yesterday had felt different because of his new experience. As he held the candy in his hand, he wondered if he should take it or hide it. He looked at the tube for the saliva sample and didn't want to keep asking Han for help, though he still wasn't sure if they could determine his gender from the sample. He recalled how, just a few minutes ago, when Han spit into his test, he found it very sweet of her. Suddenly, he felt embarrassed with himself because, even without taking the candy, he already felt devoted to the religion. At that moment, there was a knock at the door and a piece of paper slid underneath. Intrigued, Junhee picked it up and saw that it asked him to open the door silently. He assumed it must be Han, as she had just taken the candy but couldn't even write properly. She must have been waiting outside the door. As Junhee wondered if he should perform the mass again with her, he suddenly remembered that if he didn't take the candy, Hannah would get mad at him. So he decided to take it and told her to wait. But to his surprise, when he opened the door, it wasn't Han. He asked the visitor to leave and not come in, but the effects of the candy were already kicking in. Junhee realized he had forgotten his wig and everything. Laura told him to stop hiding since she already knew everything. That was why she had come. The young woman entered the room with firm steps, showing a determined attitude. Junhee, feeling somewhat nervous, wondered if she already knew he was Kay. With a calm look, she told him that she knew. She had seen him talking to that girl and surprised him even more by saying that she was aware he had a toy with him and that she wanted him to give it to her. Junhee had not expected that response at all and was left speechless. Laura continued, saying she had observed how the other girl had given him something and how, the night before, she had seen Junhee enter his room with the other girl's bag. She had been listening. With all that information, she deduced that both women must have a close relationship. Plus, with the bag and a strange object, along with the weird noises she had heard, Laura thought they liked each other and had a toy hidden away, one that Junhee had borrowed again. Pointing at him, she commented that Koreans were usually generous and that she wanted him to lend it to her. Junhee, thinking this was completely ridiculous, tried to explain that she wasn't even Korean. In response, Laura told him not to change the subject, saying that she had hurt her hand and had nothing to play the guitar or act as a substitute. Junhee tried to explain that it was all a misunderstanding, but the effects of the candy were making him increasingly confused. Laura noticed his behavior and thought he was hiding something. She lunged at him, trying to get what she believed was the toy. Laura grabbed the chalice, thinking Junhee was still resisting so he wouldn't have to lend it to her. Junhee told her to stop, but she ignored him until, finally, she did, leaving Junhee even more bewildered. Nevertheless, Laura started playing with the chalice. According to her, if she could make Junhee spill the holy water, she would lend him the doll. Junhee insisted that it was physically impossible, but he felt like he was going to faint due to exhaustion. He asked her to stop while saying the name Nora, to which Laura asked how he knew her name, calling him Gun. Junhee was surprised, as he didn't understand how a foreigner knew that concept. While she continued her mission, she asked if he wanted to take a break from their game, but that wasn't an option since she also wanted to use it later, so she had to finish as quickly as possible. At that moment, Junhee collapsed, spilling the holy water. This surprised Laura, who commented on how intelligent Korean toys were. Finally exhausted, Junhee gave up and told her his name was Junhee. He asked if she didn't remember, but due to his fatigue, he was losing consciousness. The young woman observed him in silence but recognized the name and asked if it was true. As Junhee began to fade away from the effects of the candy and the exhaustion from the game, he started to recall the days he had spent with Laura, Norin, 3 years ago in high school. A classmate had obtained some pictures of women and had mentioned that he got them from his parents' printing job. The boys gathered around the table to see them, and although Junhee had seen similar things on the internet before, he couldn't help but be surprised by the quality of the images. Meanwhile, his classmates tried to imitate what they saw. One of them noticed Junhee's interest and offered him one of the images. Junhee, though feeling uncomfortable, refused the offer, but the boy insisted and gave it to him anyway. At that moment, they were interrupted by Doojon, who was complaining that the person in charge hadn't taken out the trash. The boy said he would take it out soon. As he stepped outside with the trash, he took out the photograph again, feeling slightly uneasy. He was afraid someone would catch him with it, thinking it might be illegal. Although back then he often worried about things he later considered insignificant, he couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. Just as he was debating whether to throw the image away, a woman dressed completely in black appeared. Junhee, confused, looked at her, and in a nervous panic, thought she was from the FBI. He quickly assured her that he hadn't done anything wrong, that he had just been given something. The young woman looked at him, bewildered, not understanding his words. She simply wanted to know where the teacher's lounge was, as she would be attending that school starting today. She commented that it was very hot in Korea, and introduced herself as Noran. Her incredible presence pleasantly surprised Junhee. Later in class, she was introduced as Laura, a transfer student due to her father's work. Yoon commented that in some foreign countries, girls were more liberal and started much earlier, claiming that Laura had already been performing some of those masses. Junhee thought her German name was difficult to pronounce. Doojon, somewhat annoyed, wondered why the teacher always asked them to introduce new students. Then, the teacher asked if someone could give her a tour of the school since she had to return to the teacher's lounge. The classmates were surprised to see a foreigner, but Dojo noticed that no one seemed willing to volunteer, which would make more work for her. However, Laura interrupted, saying there was no need to worry since the first person she met could help her. Even though Dojo wasn't sure who she meant, Laura pointed at Junhee as the one responsible for showing her around. Though he seemed incredulous at her decision, this happened in the second semester on a cold day when the leaves on the trees were turning golden. Laura's presence did not go unnoticed in the school hallways. The murmurs started quickly, highlighting her beauty and how she caught everyone's attention. That year, Junhee received more attention than ever in his life. People talked about how beautiful the new student was, and even though he tried to leave her behind, Laura ran after him, wanting to hold his hand. It was strange for others to see a foreigner following him, but she clung to his arm with determination. She asked him to help her choose a club, and Junhee, somewhat annoyed, just wanted her to stop shouting. Although for him, all this closeness would end as soon as he showed her the school, somehow Laura became more attached to him. It seemed like she needed an interpreter, but that wasn't actually the case. Laura asked which club he was in, but his response was cold. "That's none of your business. Just pick one already." Even though Laura was looking for something fun, at that moment, Han overheard the conversation and approached. He invited the blonde to join the swimming club, surprising both of them. Junhee and Han exchanged glances, but neither said anything. Han continued speaking, explaining that their club had school support and that they could use the pools for practice. Laura discreetly looked under Han's skirt, leaving the young woman completely confused. Junhee was also perplexed by the situation. With this, Laura confirmed that it was true that when the club had practice, they wore their swimsuits to school. Han kept insisting if she was interested in joining. Laura replied that she didn't like getting her hair wet, which left Junhee completely dumbfounded because he found it ridiculous. They then decided to look for another club. They toured the entire school, and in the badminton club, Laura said she hated sweating. In the photography club, she wanted to take a picture from a low angle using the best camera available. In the film club, she fell asleep. They visited many clubs, but none seemed interesting to Laura. Junhee, already exhausted, suggested she pick one at random. Laura asked if he didn't have to go to his own club, and Junhee responded that he never went. That was when Dasom appeared, having heard from Han that they were looking for a club. This gave Junhee a great idea. If he could get Laura to join the choir club, he could use it as an excuse to get closer to Daum. While he was lost in his imagination, already on a honeymoon, Das mentioned that perhaps the reading club would interest her. Upon arriving at the club, Junhee noticed they were not in the choir club. Dasom explained that here, they could request books that weren't available in the library, allowing Laura to read books in German. Upon entering the club, Dasom greeted Junhee, who was there. Then she asked if they were looking for new members since she had brought some interested people. The girl thanked her for her interest. After that, Dasom left, as she had to practice. Junhee thought it made sense that she hadn't invited her to join the choir if she didn't know whether she could sing well or not. While Laura browsed some shelves, Junhee realized that he hadn't seen Junhee in a while. Although she only nodded in silence, the situation felt awkward since he never went to this club, even though it was his. However, Laura loved the atmosphere and decided to join the reading club, which she abbreviated as CL. Later, while Junhee was talking with a friend about standing out, Laura interrupted him to invite him to do club activities together. Junhee asked her to listen to what he had to say, but Laura insisted that he should participate in club activities because, according to her, friends do things together. Upon arriving at the library, both Laura and Junhee realized that Yang Yi was there. She told him not to be surprised since she was also a member of the CL club. The young woman commented that lately, she always saw Junhee with Laura, and he replied that he didn't have much choice since Laura kept dragging him along. Junhee, somewhat curious, asked if they had gone to mass together. Junhee was surprised by the question. Despite the awkwardness, John insisted on asking about the smell of Laura's danonino, given that foreigners tend to be more open. Laura, upon hearing the conversation, intervened, understanding that Koreans liked gossip. She said she didn't like false rumors and clarified that her color was pink, which would prove her innocence. However, Junhee, somewhat embarrassed, blamed everything on Junhee and expelled her. Then he asked Laura to get dressed while covering his eyes. Every day after classes, Junhee and Laura went to the library with an unmatched tranquility. They were always alone, and the only sound that could be heard was the turning of pages. They spent so much time there that Junhee thought that, even though he never attended the club before, if there were a badge for going so often, he would have already earned it. One day, when Junhee had to leave early, Junhee realized they should leave too. However, the girl handed him the key that needed to be returned to the teacher's lounge. Junhee was also about to leave, but his companion didn't think they should wake Laura up. That was when Junhee noticed that Laura had fallen asleep. He couldn't help but notice her long, soft legs, her slender waist that seemed easy to wrap an arm around, and her shiny hair that swayed in rhythm with her calm breathing, making him focus on her soft lips and fair skin. Junhee felt his heart begin to race. At that moment, he started hearing his name, and slowly, Laura began to wake up. It was Laura who was calling him. Junhee asked if she always watched over him when he was away, and she, holding the chalice in her hand, smiled at him. Although Junhee was blushing, Laura was happy to see him, but Junhee asked why she was drinking that. This confused the boy even more when she mentioned a famous doctor. He insisted that she should go to her room, but he was surprised when she refused. She explained that if she did, she would start singing alone and wouldn't be able to sleep. Spilling a little holy water, she asked Junhee to accompany her to Mass together. Then, Laura asked Junhee if he was tired while observing the chalice, which had no shine at all. Junhee tried to stop her, but Laura continued with her left hand, saying a phrase that didn't make sense at that moment. Junhee asked her to talk for a moment, to which she asked what exactly he wanted to talk about. For Junhee, it was obvious. He needed to know if anyone else knew his true identity, and if it was noticeable that he wasn't a girl. Laura replied that she didn't know until he told her, so she was sure no one else knew. Then she observed Junhee and commented that he was smaller and had narrow shoulders. She assured him that, in her opinion, nothing had changed. Because she was so close to him, Junhee wanted her to step back, but Laura noticed how the chalice's shine began to reflect, since it was between the two panes. Junhee, realizing this, apologized, but Laura asked if he liked panes since she remembered that the boy used to be like that. However, the expression on his face changed, and his gaze became cold, something Junhee had seen before, 3 years ago. Classes ended earlier than expected, and no students could stay there any longer, as Johan had warned. A classmate offered Junhee a plan to go to the PC cafes, which annoyed Doyon, who was giving the announcement. Yoongi apologized, saying he already had plans, and his friend was surprised to see that he no longer spent time with them. However, the CL could be a good opportunity, as the club offered new experiences, like the chance to be close to Laura. Although what his friend liked most were Laura's great feelings. His friend asked Junhee if he was dating her, to which Junhee denied it. However, his friend didn't believe him, as he had never participated in activities before and now didn't miss a single one with Laura. Junhee commented that he could be her interpreter or assistant, to which his friend asked why she would need one. Just then, Laura approached and asked what he was doing sitting there, inviting him to go out with her. Both Junhee and his friend were stunned by her beauty, but they both left. As they walked, Doge called their attention, reminding them that they had to go home, but the blonde wouldn't listen to a figure of authority. Junhee complained that she was pulling his arm while Laura happily strolled through the hallways. Not only were they going to hang out, but they already had something planned for that day. The reading club had received some funds, so they decided to spend them at the zoo to help members get to know each other better. Laura was really excited to see the zebras. The blonde wondered why they were striped. She wanted to get closer, but Junhee told her it could be dangerous. She replied that he shouldn't worry since they were herbivorous animals. On the other hand, the boy apologized to Yeonho, as he felt they had been dragged along by Laura. Although she found it fun and didn't think it was a bad idea, as animal book lovers, Laura was really excited, pulling Junhee's arm the whole time to show him everything she saw. First, they went to see the mandrill, which she thought was a strange-looking monkey. Laura wanted to get closer to it as if it were a temptation, but Junhee asked her to stop. Then she saw another monkey and asked him to look at it. Although Junhee saw it was just an ordinary monkey, Laura kept insisting that he observe carefully. They were watching a monkey nursing its baby, and Laura commented that it was maternal instinct while touching her own chest. Junhee started feeling very uncomfortable and asked her to take her hands away since he wanted them to watch the animals in silence. Laura defended herself, saying she hadn't done anything wrong. At that moment, Yeonho, who was looking at her phone, excused herself, saying that her parents had called and she had to leave, which surprised both of them. Junhee saw this as an opportunity to end the visit and head to the train station, but Laura refused. She wanted to keep seeing more animals. Junhee, annoyed, asked her to stop acting like a child while she threw a tantrum. Yeonho, completely surprised, told them they should stay, and she would take the subway. Junhee asked if she was sure, apologizing for what had happened. That was when Laura felt that good had triumphed over evil, something Junhee found quite strange. After Yeonho left, the two of them continued exploring the zoo, with Laura dragging him wherever she wanted to go. They saw the beautiful otters, several seals in the aquarium, and deer they could touch. After observing so many animals, Junhee was already exhausted, and his legs hurt a lot, so he needed to sit somewhere. In front of the elephants, Laura commented that she loved the Korean name for elephants since they were known as long noses because of their trunks, which made her like it even more. Thinking too much about it, Junhee mentioned that he still didn't have a Korean name and asked if she could give him one. Since his last name was Zeppelin, she suggested that Che would be perfect. And for Laura, because of her blonde hair, Norin would be ideal. Together, they would form the name Chain Norin. Laura found it hard to believe and asked if he really thought that. Without hesitation, Junhee answered that he was completely serious. At that moment, Laura opened up saying that coming to Korea had been very difficult for her. People avoided her and didn't want to talk to her, but he was different. She was about to say something else but didn't get the chance because a voice surprised them, commenting that they were having a great time and that he could have saved himself all the effort of coming if he had known. Both were startled, and Junhee quickly recognized the person who had interrupted them. It was Yang, who, although he seemed a little cruel, mentioned that he didn't usually go out much but was a member of the research committee. He had heard about the trip and didn't want to miss it, despite arriving late. The girl, seeing Junhee's expression, thought he was annoyed, but he assured her it was nothing. Laura seemed a bit sad about the interruption while Yang asked what animals they planned to see, wanting to make sure the money was worth it. Junhee, anxious to hear what Laura had to say, couldn't do anything because Yang kept pushing him from one side to another to see the lions, which seemed to irritate Noran. Back at the zoo, Laura was fascinated by the leopard's fur, but the moment was interrupted when Yang made an inappropriate comment about leopard print and some actresses' clothing. Junhee kept getting in the way between them, even asking if she found that pattern attractive. Then, they went to buy churros. Laura wanted to try Uni's because it had chocolate glaze, but once again, Junhee got in the way. She could barely finish a sentence without being interrupted. Junhee took one of Junhee's churros and told him to only eat the parts with chocolate. At the end of the day, the plan seemed fun, but once again, John's interference had been very persistent. Having spent the whole day with Laura almost like it was a date, he called Junhee a fool, but now noticed that he was doing well on his own. He mentioned that tomorrow would be an interesting day at school. Although Junhee didn't know what he meant, Junhee hinted that there might be rumors circulating about them, as if they had really been on a date. At the zoo, all the boys would ask Junhee what had happened at the end of the day. Laura, annoyed, told him not to dare do something like that since she didn't like rumors about her. Junhee defended himself, saying she shouldn't take it seriously, that it was just a joke between guys. He told her that boys usually whispered things about girls' bodies, and was sure that Junhee had been looking all day. Laura blushed, angry, and strongly denied that her friend was like that. She knew that he always helped her daily, finding books to read together, and she recognized that boys talked about her body, but she knew that Junhee would never talk about her that way. However, Junhee seemed to think that all men were the same. Junhee asked her to stop, but she pushed him and told him to stay out of it, saying she wanted him to stop acting like the defender of justice. As he fell to the ground, his jacket got dirty, and Laura asked him to take it off so she could clean it. At that moment, Junhee confronted Junhee, telling him that he always interrupted when he just wanted to have a good time, searching for the reason behind his actions. Just then, Laura dropped a piece of paper from her jacket. The argument continued, with both of them blaming each other for not paying attention to the club until Laura arrived. Meanwhile, Laura held the paper and opened it with a surprised expression. They kept arguing until Junhee called Laura and asked her to leave with him, telling her they should just walk away. But as Laura approached, Junhee asked her not to listen to what Junhee was saying. Laura, upset, threw her jacket at him. Junhee, not understanding the problem, soon saw the image his friend had given him. He regretted not throwing it away earlier. He tried to explain to Laura that it wasn't his, but she had already realized that Junhee was just like the rest of the boys. That was when Laura ran away. Junhee, noticing what had happened, asked what that was, but he already knew. Laura had gone home alone. The next day, Junhee intended to explain what had happened, but she never returned to school. Then, Do-John announced that Laura would be transferred again, since she would be attending a school for foreigners. This left Junhee regretting not asking for her number or address, even though he had never felt the need to before since they always met at school. A few days later, while in class, Junhee noticed something under his desk. When he checked, he found an animal encyclopedia, the same book Laura used to read in the library. This made him think that maybe she had gone to school to submit her transfer documents. Although he didn't expect to receive anything from her, when he flipped through the book, he found some blonde hairs between the pages, making him think about her even more. Back in the present, Junhee was quite nervous about Laura's cold stare. Despite feeling anxious, he tried to explain himself, even if it was late. He told her the photo wasn't his, but Laura interrupted him, stopping him, saying that was wrong. Although Junhee didn't fully understand, he recognized that she was right and regretted it, because he had wanted to apologize first. However, Laura surprised him by kissing his forehead. Then with a smile, she told him he was a fool because that day, she had gotten angry for no reason. Besides, she didn't understand why he was apologizing since the one who should be doing it was her. When she mentioned that was wrong, Laura clarified that she was referring to her name. She wasn't called Laura, This intrigued Yuni. The girl continued explaining that she stopped going to school because she was upset and convinced her parents to transfer her. That day, when she arrived at her new school, she realized that no one would call her by that name anymore. Rather, she thought that there would no longer be any juniors in her class. That's why she decided to introduce herself as Chain Noran. She explained to Yuni that when she was with him, she wasn't Laura Zeppelin. She was Chain Noran, and she wanted to continue being that person for him. Then she added that she would teach him a Russian cleaning technique. With a smile, she asked if he felt at ease with the situation. Junhee felt an inner peace, as if a soft blanket wrapped around his soul. That was when Noran, happy with his effort, asked for a kiss as a reward, which Yuni didn't hesitate to give her. At that moment, Yuni accidentally spilled holy water, something that Noran didn't take too seriously. However, she made a funny comment that, due to her peculiar sense of humor, Yuni found somewhat inappropriate for the occasion. Then, the girl mentioned another misunderstanding that had arisen at school and how people always talked about them behind their backs. Finally, she asked him if his heart was black and told him to look closely to discover what color it really was. And with that, we conclude this part of the Manhwa. I hope you all enjoyed it to the fullest. If so, don't forget to give us your valuable like, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and of course, share this video with all your friends. Remember, if you want to see the next part, smash the like button. The more support this video gets, the faster we'll bring you the next one. See you in the next video. Take care, and goodbye.